started with a van. CCTV caught it inching toward the glass doors of a small shop in Nottinghamshire. The street was silent. No headlights, just the crunch of tires on tarmac. Then, impact, glass everywhere, two hooded figures out in seconds. One headed straight for the ATM, use of hammer and dragging chains. The other stood guard, face low, frame tight to the wall. Within minutes, the entire machine was ripped from its casing and loaded into the van. No alarms, no shouting, just broken glass and a missing cash point. Police thought it was a one-off. A bold hit, unusual but isolated. Then it happened again. Different town, same method, then again and again, until a pattern began to form, stretching from Peterborough to Ayr, from Wolverhampton to Milngavie. What looked like random destruction wasn't random at all. This is the story of the gang that tore through 40 UK towns and how it took 5 forces to bring them down. At the center of the operation were 3 men, quiet, unnoticed, and deeply methodical. Patrick Gulhaney, 34, from Loughborough, was the strategist. He didn't speak much, but he planned everything. He decided the target, what was worth the risk. He chose the timing, when the streets would be quiet. The location, always just far enough to delay response. And the method, fast, precise, and brutal. John Smith, 32, based in Spalding, handled the infrastructure. He was the one finding stolen vehicles, mapping routes, sourcing phones. And then there was Tarley Smith, 34, from Bagworth, the kit man. He controlled the tools, the safe houses, the storage units filled with gear no one was supposed to find. They didn't operate like thrill seekers. They weren't brash or loud. They were calm, cold, and efficient. Every role was fixed, every task assigned, and nothing was left to chance. They moved in silence, used only burner phones and kept circles tight. Then there are other team members, but we will talk about them in a moment. Each operation was prepped weeks in advance, a target selected, the ATM studied, vehicles sourced, often weeks earlier, stolen from counties far away, then stored in rural garages or on farmland. Preparation was precise. They used cloned number plates to disguise every vehicle. Each tool was checked and tested before it ever left storage. And escape routes weren't guessed. They were mapped days in advance, winding through back lanes, secluded fields, and even canal paths if needed. They weren't improvising. They were executing. By the time police even suspected a coordinated gang, the trio had already hit more than a dozen sites. Shops, petrol stations, post offices, anywhere with a cash point and weak perimeter security. The pace was relentless, and nothing connected them. No direct financial links, no shared addresses, no chatter on phones. Just the damage left behind and the vanishing trail of cash. At that time, behind every raid, every charred getaway car, and snapped CCTV cable, it was always the same 3 names floating in the background, but 3 men alone couldn't pull off raids across 40 towns. Behind them was a tight circle, a network of specialists, all handpicked, all trusted. Around the core trio, a second ring moved in silence. They weren't there for show. They were vital. Every one of them had a role, and every role had a purpose. Alfie Boswell, 32, and William Boswell, 24, both from Bagworth in Leicestershire, were the vehicle scouts. They didn't just steal cars, they prepared them. Registration plates were cloned, interiors wiped, sometimes even resprayed. Each van, each getaway car was stored in rural sheds or remote garages until needed. Their job was to make the gang mobile and invisible. Then came Gordon McPhee. Operating out of Pumpherston near Edinburgh, he was the gang's northern enabler. He provided intel on Scottish targets, coordinated supply lines, and ensured local conditions were covered. Without him, the cross-border raids wouldn't have been possible. Behind the scenes, the logistics were handled mostly by women, partners, relatives, trusted insiders. Sarah Haynes, Victoria Smith, and Rosie McAllister arranged travel, booked overnight stays, and scouted locations under the guise of everyday errands. In some cases, they monitored local radio chatter, listening in for police movement. Frances Gilhaney, also known as Kathleen Connors, dealt with the aftermath, laundered cash, handled drop-offs, managed cash couriers who weren't traceable on paper. What held them together wasn't money, it was loyalty. Most were family, all were trusted. There were no freelancers, no third parties, everyone knew someone. And that made them hard to penetrate. When one moved, others followed. When one job was planned, everyone slotted into place. This wasn't just support, it was structured. AMD with the right people in place, all that remained was execution. And that's where the gang's methods set them apart. Each attack was tailored, but the structure never changed. If the target was an outdoor machine, the job was fast and mechanical. A stolen van reversed hard into place. Straps fixed to the ATM base. A short pause, then a roar. The machine wrenched from its footing and dragged into the van in seconds. No words, no hesitation. For indoor targets, it got louder. Doors were rammed, walls breached. Sometimes with vehicles, sometimes with portable hydraulic spreaders. Inside, they moved quickly, using drills and thermic lances to bypass the ATM's internal locks. The goal wasn't just to open the machine, it was to do it before police had time to respond. Timing was everything. They struck between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m., that window when the streets are dead and rural patrols are stretched thin. Their confidence grew with each hit. Cameras were avoided or disabled. In one case, they applied reflective tape to lenses to blind CCTV before entry. Afterwards, the cleanup was surgical. Vehicles were dumped and torched, tools thrown in rivers or buried in woods. DNA wiped with bleach, gloves burned or soaked. In one instance, acid was poured onto a set of bolt cutters. They didn't leave anything that could speak for them. Over time, their methods evolved. What started as brute force attacks became more refined, faster and more coordinated. They adapted with every job, learning what triggered alarms, what doors gave way quicker, and which areas lacked CCTV coverage. To the outside world, it looked like chaos, but to those inside, it was choreography. But tactics alone don't explain how they struck so far, so often, because this wasn't a local crew. Their reach was national. They didn't stay in one place. The gang moved like smoke, hard to track and impossible to pin down. From Loughborough to Wolverhampton, from Peterborough to Luton, from the English Midlands to the Scottish Lowlands. Over 40 towns and cities were targeted during the 19-month spree. Petrol stations, train stations, small convenience stores, even a post office in Ayr. Each hit was mapped to a fresh location, sometimes hours from the last, leaving different police forces chasing shadows. The spread wasn't random, it was deliberate. Fast hits in one region were followed by long stretches of silence, then another burst in a different part of the country. Scotland became key. The link was Gordon McPhee. It was McPhee who helped the gang blend in north of the border. And it was his role that turned them from a regional threat into a nationwide operation. The logistics were built to move. Vehicles were swapped constantly. Motorhomes, pickup trucks, even saloon cars. All stolen, all cloned. These weren't just robberies, they were campaigns. But even the most disciplined crew leaves traces, and by early 2022, the gang's perfect system had started to crack. It wasn't one mistake. It was a series of small oversights that, piece by piece, gave investigators their opening. In January 2022, investigators got their first clear break. Gilhaney and John Smith were caught travelling from Peterborough to Scotland, not in a high-powered 4x4, but in a Fiat motorhome. At first glance, it looked unremarkable. But AMPR picked up two more vehicles making the same journey, a blue Saab and a grey Audi RS4, both fitted with cloned plates. Days later, the Audi was found burned out in Huntington. Forensic checks confirmed it had been stolen from Merseyside months earlier. The match, the timing, and the routes all pointed to something bigger unfolding. That same week, 4 ATMs were attacked across the central belt of Scotland. Police went back through CCTV, cross-referenced timestamps, and pulled data from nearby traffic cameras. The vehicles matched. So did the tools recovered near each site: drills, saws, face masks, even itemized receipts for gloves and dark clothing. Then came the forensic hits. A crowbar left in a van used during the very first attack in Loughborough came back with Gilhaney's DNA, a key left behind after the Attenborough raid in Nottinghamshire was linked to Tali Smith. Surveillance footage placed Tali near one scene days before the break-in. Individually, they were scraps. Together, they were a net tightening. The gang's habit of using burner phones gave them cover, but not immunity. When phones were reused across different jobs, police were able to triangulate their signals. Combined with travel patterns, it gave prosecutors a digital map of movement, motive, and method. By November 2022, the trap was ready. Over 200 officers from 7 different forces carried out coordinated raids in Leicester, Lincolnshire, and Edinburgh. Properties were searched, vehicles seized, cash counted, burners, thermal lances, CCTV jammers, all found, and most importantly, 10 arrests. The core trio, their network, the entire command structure. The gang system hadn't failed all at once. It had unraveled, slowly, inevitably, under the weight of evidence. It didn't happen all at once. The first arrest came quietly, a house in Loughborough, early morning, Patrick Gilhaney. No chase, no drama. Just a name that had been circling in silence for weeks, now crossed off the board. John Smith followed shortly after, picked up in Spalding. Investigators had been watching. His movements, the motorhome trip to Scotland, the timing, none of it lined up as innocent anymore. Enough had been gathered to bring him in. Tali Smith was next. Taken from Bagworth, the same village where multiple vehicles had been stored and prepared. Like the others, his role was quiet, operational, but no less central. Alfie and William Boswell, also from Bagworth, were known to handle the vehicles. Their names had surfaced again and again, tied to the cars used and the places they were kept. In Edinburgh, Gordon McPhee was taken from his home in Pumpherston. His role had been crucial in extending the operation north. Among those arrested were 4 women, not directly involved in the break-ins, but critical to the smooth running of the operation. Each played a support role: travel, accommodation, coordination, and in some cases, obstruction. Sarah Haynes, 35, was taken into custody in Bagworth. Police identified her role in arranging accommodation and supporting travel logistics during the gang's extended operations. In Spalding, Victoria Smith, also 35, was arrested under suspicion of assisting the group with regional coordination. Rosie McAllister, 28, was detained in Bagworth, while Francis Gilhaney, 33, a relative of ringleader Patrick Gilhaney, was arrested in Loughborough. Her arrest came after investigators linked her to the handling of stolen funds and the use of unregistered cash couriers. All 4 were charged with assisting an offender. By the time the case reached Leicester Crown Court in May 2024, the story was no longer about discovery. It was about accountability. The evidence had already been spoken. CCTV, vehicle data, DNA traces, phone movements, all of it laid bare in meticulous reports. The prosecution didn't need to prove the gang existed. They only needed to show how each person had kept it alive. The Crown laid out the structure: 3 leaders at the top, a logistical ring beneath, and a network of supporters around them. They described the group not as opportunists, but as a cold, coordinated operation. The prosecutor called it a system designed to evade detection, not once or twice, but across 17 separate events. Each attack was executed with military timing, and each person played a defined part in keeping that system moving. The defense leaned on context. For the core trio, they didn't dispute the timeline. They focused on motivation. Legal teams spoke of economic pressure, poor prospects, and a desperation that escalated over time. In some cases, they argued the defendants had been used by others in the group, dragged deeper into something they didn't fully control. For the women, the defense painted a picture of domestic obligation, support given not out of criminal intent, but personal ties. One barrister argued that the female defendants didn't profit, didn't plan, and didn't see the whole picture. They acted out of loyalty, not malice. Over 6 weeks, witness statements, data logs, and forensic results reinforced what had already been built in the shadows. And when it came time to sentence, the structure that once held together a nationwide crime ring was about to be dismantled, piece by piece. When sentencing began, there were no surprises left, only consequences. Judge Brown addressed the court plainly. These were serious and organized crimes. The damage was not just financial, it was structural, emotional, and social, inflicted on communities already stretched thin. And just like that, the system was dismantled. Patrick Kilhenny, 34, received the longest term, 7 years and 6 months. The court heard how he orchestrated operations from the center. John Smith, 32, was handed 7 years and 6 months as well. Tally Smith, 34, received 6 years and 8 months, reflecting his part in managing equipment and safe house planning. Alfie Boswell, 32, was sentenced to 5 years, convicted of conspiracy to steal and assisting offenders. His younger brother, William Boswell, 24, received 3 years for similar charges. In Edinburgh, Gordon McPhee, 37, stood trial separately. After being found guilty in February 2024, he was sentenced to 6 years for his role in enabling the Scottish operations. The 4 female defendants each received 12-month sentences, suspended for 24 months. Sarah Haynes, Victoria Smith, Rosie McAllister, and Frances Kilhenny were convicted of assisting an offender. What do you make of this case? Were the sentences enough, or did the scale of the damage deserve more? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. If you want more real UK crime stories like this, subscribe, turn on notifications, and stay with us. There's always another case to uncover.